Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. There's a growing theory that Avengers Doomsday is where Bucky Barnes finally dies. Sebastian Stan has been playing Bucky for over a decade. 9 movies, a Disney Plus series, and one of the most complete character journeys in the MCU. He started as a sidekick, became a brainwashed villain, fought his way back to being a hero, and now he's literally a congressman. That's a full arc. There isn't much left to explore without repeating the same beats. But the real reason fans are worried has nothing to do with the story, it's the schedule. Stan just signed on for The Batman Part 2, which starts filming in May 2026. That's the exact window when Avengers Secret Wars is supposed to begin production. So if he's in Gotham, he's not in Secret Wars. And if Bucky doesn't make it to Secret Wars, that strongly suggests he doesn't survive Doomsday. From a narrative perspective, it almost makes too much sense. Steve Rogers is confirmed to be back, and the teasers hint that he now has a son, something real to protect. If Dr. Doom kills Bucky, Steve's best friend and the person he spent years trying to save, that's instant emotional stakes. That's the kind of loss that pushes Steve into an all-out war. It would also hit Sam Wilson hard, since Bucky has been one of his closest allies, and it would give the new Avengers a personal reason to rally against Doom. And let's be honest, audiences love Bucky. He's funny, he's tragic, and his redemption story is one of the strongest in the entire franchise. Taking him out would hurt, which is exactly why it would work. There's also the real-world angle. Stan's career has taken off outside Marvel. He's getting major roles, award nominations, and leading projects on his own. At some point, Marvel has to start closing the book on some of its original era characters. So when you combine the completed character arc, the filming conflict, and the massive emotional payoff his death would create, it stops feeling like a wild theory and starts feeling like setup. If Doomsday needs a moment that tells the audience, this villain is serious, Bucky Barnes is the character that would make that message hit the hardest. Professor Charles Xavier. At this point, Professor X dying on screen has stopped being shocking and started feeling like tradition. Patrick Stewart's Xavier has already been killed multiple times, The Last Stand, Logan, and even Multiverse of Madness. Every time he shows up, it somehow ends the same way, and everything we've seen from the Doomsday setup suggests that pattern isn't changing. The teaser footage with Magneto and Xavier sitting in the destroyed mansion doesn't play like a survival scene, it plays like a farewell. Magneto talking about death being inevitable doesn't sound like warning, it sounds like a goodbye. There's also the real-world factor. Stewart has said this is his final time playing the character, and Marvel has already confirmed the MCU is moving toward a younger X-Men lineup. If the Fox-era mutants are being phased out, the cleanest way to do that is on screen. And from a story perspective, Xavier's death does a lot of work. Dr. Doom is still new to audiences. He doesn't have years of build-up yet, but if the first major thing he does is take out the most powerful telepath on the planet, that instantly establishes him as a threat on a completely different level. It also hits the X-Men emotionally. Xavier isn't just their leader, he's their mentor, their moral compass. Losing him would push Magneto, Cyclops, Storm, and the rest of the team into action and force them to align with the Avengers. At the same time, it gives Marvel a clean transition into a full reboot with new actors. The only issue is that fans have watched this version of Xavier die so many times that it's almost expected. But that might be exactly why Marvel does it again, not for shock value, but as a final send-off. Because if the old guard is stepping aside, it makes sense for Xavier to be the one who goes first. Thor Odinson. Thor's teaser doesn't sound like a battle speech. It sounds like a goodbye. He's kneeling in front of Odin's throne, not asking for victory, but asking for the strength to fight one more time and then go home to his daughter. He talks about wanting to return not as a warrior, but as something gentle, something peaceful. That's not the mindset of someone planning his next adventure. That's someone preparing for his last one. Thor has been around since the beginning. 4 solo movies, multiple Avengers films, and by the time Doomsday releases, Chris Hemsworth will have played him for about 15 years. That's one of the longest runs in the entire MCU. Love and Thunder already started shifting his story away from endless battles. He became a father figure to love. For the first time, Thor has something more important than the next fight. He has someone to protect. And in superhero stories, that usually means one thing: sacrifice. The teaser confirms Love is in danger, and if Doom threatens her, Thor isn't walking away. He's the kind of character who would trade his life without hesitation if it meant she survives. It also fits thematically. Odin died to protect his people. Thor doing the same to protect his child would bring his story full circle, and finally give him the peace he's been chasing since Infinity War. At the same time, it opens the door for new Asgardian characters. Valkyrie is already leading New Asgard. Rumors about Beta Ray Bill and other cosmic players mean the Thor mantle doesn't disappear, it just evolves. Some people think Thor makes it to Secret Wars, but that prayer feels like acceptance. He's not asking to win, he's asking to go home. And when a character starts talking like that in the MCU, it usually means they don't. Cyclops. Cyclops finally getting a hero moment might be the exact reason he doesn't survive Doomsday. For years, the Fox movies never really let Scott Summers be the leader he's supposed to be. Now the teasers show him in the classic blue and yellow suit, visor off, unleashing a full-power optic blast like he just stepped out of the comics. It's the version of Cyclops fans have been waiting to see, and that's what makes it feel like a farewell. Marvel has a habit of bringing back legacy characters, giving them one defining scene, and then taking them off the board. It's a way to give closure while still moving the story forward. If James Marsden is returning at this stage, it's likely for a single, meaningful appearance rather than the start of a long-term role. The footage also hints that the X-Men are hit early. The mansion is destroyed, the battlefield looks wiped out, and Cyclops is shown in the aftermath of something catastrophic. If Doom's first move is attacking the Fox universe, taking down its field leader would immediately show how dangerous he is. It would mirror the way Infinity War opened by wiping out characters we thought were safe. Bringing Cyclops back only to lose him in the first act sends a message that this villain doesn't care about legacy, nostalgia, or fan expectations. There's also a thematic angle. The Fox X-Men are tied to a universe that's collapsing. An incursion is coming, their world is ending, and Cyclops is exactly the kind of character who would keep fighting even if he knew it was hopeless. That's who he's always been. The guy who stands his ground when everyone else is ready to fall back. If he goes out leading the X-Men, buying time, or trying to save a world that can't be saved, it finally gives him the respect those earlier films never did. And it turns his return into something heroic instead of just nostalgic. Red Guardian, Alexei Shostakov. Red Guardian feels like the kind of character who exists to break your heart in Doomsday. He's funny, he's lovable, and he's not a long-term pillar of the MCU, which makes him the perfect emotional casualty. Since Black Widow, Alexei has been more than comic relief. He's been a flawed father figure trying to make up for the years he wasn't there for Yelena. Every appearance has pushed that idea further. He failed her once, and he wants another chance to get it right. In superhero stories, that kind of setup usually leads to one outcome: the redemption sacrifice. Yelena is clearly being positioned as the next Black Widow. She's the future of that legacy, but emotionally, she's still tied to her past: the Red Room, Natasha, and Alexei. Losing him in a moment where he finally does the right thing would be the event that pushes her forward. It also fits the tone Marvel likes for team-up movies. When a villain takes out someone who brings humor and heart to the group, it instantly changes the mood and makes the threat feel real. Red Guardian has become one of the most endearing members of the Thunderbolts, which makes him the exact kind of character whose death would land. From a practical standpoint, it works too. Yelena's story needs a defining moment that belongs to her, not just something connected to Natasha. If Alexei dies protecting her, actually being the hero he always claimed to be, that becomes her emotional turning point. You can already picture the scene. Doom attacks, Yelena is the target, and Alexei steps in without thinking. No jokes, no pretending, just a father choosing his daughter. It would be tragic, but it would complete his arc and finally free Yelena to step into her own identity. And that kind of payoff is exactly what Doomsday is going to be built on. War Machine. James Rhodes' Rhodey is one of the few characters who's been there since the early days and somehow never got his own spotlight. He's shown up in film after film, backed Tony, fought in wars, survived Civil War, and kept doing the job without ever being the center of the story. And with Armor Wars stuck in development limbo for years, it's starting to feel like Marvel doesn't have a clear future mapped out for him. That's what makes him vulnerable. He's not a new variant or a legacy character being phased in. He's part of the original foundation. Taking him off the board would immediately tell the audience that longevity doesn't equal safety. There's also the emotional angle. Rhodey isn't a god or a super soldier. He's just a man in a suit trying to keep up with people who can bend reality. That's always been his appeal. If someone like him falls, it makes the threat feel grounded and real. And then there's the possibility everyone keeps talking about: Doom having Tony's face. Rhodey facing a version of his best friend, even for a split second, would be enough to make him hesitate. That pause is all a villain like Doom would need. No dramatic speech, no drawn-out fight, just a ruthless move that shows he doesn't care about history, friendship, or legacy. That kind of moment would hurt because Rhodey has been around so long. He's not flashy, he's not constantly in the spotlight, but he's been a constant presence since Iron Man 2. Losing him would feel like losing one of the last pieces of the original era. It also reinforces the larger message of Doomsday. If someone that steady, that experienced, and that loyal can be taken out, then no one is safe. And that's exactly the tone a movie like this is going to need. Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner. Nightcrawler is finally back, and for a lot of fans, that's a huge deal. Alan Cumming hasn't played Kurt Wagner since X2 in 2003. That's more than 20 years ago. He was one of the standout characters in that film. The teleporting mutant with the blue skin, the tail, and the acrobatic fighting style. And people have been asking for his return ever since. Now he's in Doomsday, but this doesn't look like the beginning of a long-term role. It looks like a one-time comeback. That usually means one thing. Marvel brings back legacy characters, gives them a big moment, and then uses them to raise the stakes. Nightcrawler's abilities make him perfect for a heroic sacrifice. Jumping into danger, saving someone at the last second, teleporting through an impossible situation. There's also the leaked detail that he fights Mr. Fantastic at some point. If that's true, it suggests Doom has manipulated the heroes into turning on each other. In that kind of chaos, Nightcrawler isn't the type to pick a side. He's the type to try to stop the fight. And that's exactly the kind of character who ends up caught in the middle. His death wouldn't just be about shock value. It would be a send-off for the Fox-era version of the character. One final action scene, one meaningful sacrifice, and a clear signal that the old X-Men are being phased out. From a story standpoint, it also opens the door for Marvel to recast a younger Nightcrawler for the MCU's future. So while his return is exciting, it also feels temporary. Fans waited 2 decades to see this version of Nightcrawler again, and Doomsday might give him one last heroic moment before saying goodbye. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. If Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man really shows up in Doomsday instead of Tom Holland's, it probably isn't for a long-term return. It feels like a goodbye. Tobey's Peter Parker is the version that defined Spider-Man for an entire generation. The train scene, the responsibility speech, the quiet, selfless hero who always chooses other people over himself. And fans have been begging Marvel to bring him back to the franchise. Bringing that version back only makes sense if the moment is big and emotional, and the multiverse setup gives them a way to do it. If his universe is collapsing, he's not showing up as a guest star. He's showing up as someone who's already lost everything and is trying to save what's left. That's the kind of character who doesn't walk away. From a story standpoint, it would hit harder than almost any other death. This isn't a new hero. This is the Spider-Man a lot of the audience grew up with. Watching him make one final choice, to protect people even when he knows it will cost him his life, would feel completely in character. It also creates a natural passing of the torch moment. If Tobey's Peter saves Tom Holland's Peter, gives him a final piece of advice, and goes out the same way Uncle Ben's words shaped him, it turns his death into something meaningful instead of just shocking. Insiders always claim certain characters are safe, but Marvel has a long history of protecting its biggest surprises. The more people say it won't happen, the more it feels like the kind of moment they'd hide. And if this really is Tobey's last appearance, a heroic sacrifice is the cleanest ending. It honors his version of the character without forcing him into future storylines. One final fight, one final act of responsibility, and then he's gone. Not as a cameo, but as a legend.